Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Juubi Naruto Goes to an Alternate Dimension Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. War does interesting things to people, it changes them, some lightly, others their whole psyche. This was especially true for the older members of the Shinobi Joint Army, those old enough to remember the horrors of great ninja wars past. Hatred for the enemy was the easiest way to deal with their emotions, a focus to contain it, to keep them saner than some of their allies. But with some, it isn't enough, they give themselves a goal, a purpose, a reason to keep on living. For many of the shinobi, there was a simple answer, the desire to simply serve their kage and their village till their last breath. To die in the name of those that died before them, family, lovers, friends. Others, such as the many missing nin that have abandoned their village over the years, search for a greater purpose for the existence, power, control, protection. This was seen in many of their fallen brothers and sisters. Naruto was always the optimist, always trying to save others, protect them, create peace for everyone. It was his promise to his departed loved ones, his friends, even his enemies. A promise to create the peace that everyone deep down in the shinobi world longs for despite what they do to try and achieve it. But even Naruto wasn't safe from long-term exposure to the war. With his kage bushin scattered around the battlefields, he witnessed true horrors that slowly began to eat away at those naive hopes he had created. The initial battle for the allied shinobi forces against the masked man calling himself Madara had resulted in their victory, or so they thought. Their enemy indeed had superior numbers in the white Zetsu clones, even more dangerous was their ability to turn into the very shinobi they fought against. The clones were so advanced that they even copied the chakra signature of those they copied, preventing even sensors or even the Byakugan to see the false fighters. This Zetsu clone army did manage to add a great deal of confusion to the war, but that wasn't what caused the most damage to the shinobi army. Kabuto had perfected the Edo Tensei, impure resurrection, allowing him to bring back to life many of the greatest warriors from each village. As cruel as that alone was, he left their minds intact, causing hesitation throughout the shinobi ranks. Thankfully, leaving their minds intact allowed the resurrected fighters to aid whoever they fought, helping them to fight and counter their styles. Even with that important factor, the kage-level opponents were still extremely difficult to defeat. Kage-level shinobi reached their levels of rank for a reason, and superior numbers would not help the shinobi army win. As such, they lost quite a few of their number during this first assault, but the masked man had lost his entire clone army, which gave them time to prepare for the next wave. Many in the army couldn't believe that they were able to defeat all the legendary shinobi that had been resurrected. Especially after Madara Uchiha had also been resurrected, somehow possessing not only the Mangekyo Sharingan, the wood style of the Shadaime Hokage, but also the Rinnegan. The legendary warrior was decimating the forces standing against him. It took the combined force of all 5 current kage to even hold their ground against him. Many of the shinobi army knew it wouldn't have been possible to even survive without the one they were trying to protect, one Naruto Uzumaki. Thanks to his skill with nature chakra, he created many clones to aid his shinobi allies. The 9-tailed Jinchuriki weeded out the Zetsu that had infiltrated, as well as helping defeat the resurrected kage-level shinobi. He himself took out the resurrected Sandaime Raikage. That wasn't the biggest battle for Naruto though. Wanting to end the battle quickly, he took off to take out the masked shinobi with the blessing of the cages. This was planned for, as when he and Killer Bee found him, he wasn't alone. He had resurrected the previous Jinchuriki and placed their Biju within their resurrected bodies. It was here that Kurama, the 9-tailed fox, truly accepted Naruto as a comrade and not a jailer. Unlike the other Jinchuriki, where their Biju give them their chakra to take on their true forms, Naruto and Kurama shared it, combined it, making them significantly more powerful than an ordinary full Biju transformation. Like his 9-tailed cloak, their full possession was similar in nature, a combination of their chakra to form a golden yellow instead of the dark orange chakra of the fox. Together they showed their power to dominate the former Jinchuriki, with Guy, Kakashi and B sealing them, forcing the masked man to flee. Kakashi and Guy had to stop Naruto from following the man down. They too knew they needed to regroup, and losing Naruto would not aid them at all. All it took was to remind Naruto of the Battle of the Cages, including Tsunade, against the resurrected Madara, and the young Jinchuriki took off in that direction to help the mother figure in his life. The two Jinchuriki and elite Jonin arrived to see all 5 cages looking beaten, worn out and furious. Madara had been returned to his coffin, to fight another day before they could successfully seal him. The cages did count their blessings though. They had managed to seal the strongest members of their individual villages, which meant the next battle should be easier with any luck. They once more hid Naruto and Killer Bee and sent ninjutsu specialists to them. With Guy, Kakashi and Killer Bee's description of the battle against the other Jinchuriki, the difference in Naruto's complete beast mode to other Jinchuriki, they thought teaching him as many jutsu as possible while they had the chance was something they had to do. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki had even more chakra than Killer Bee. Unlike other Jinchuriki, Naruto had proven the ability to use jutsu while using the Kyuubi's chakra. Something no other Jinchuriki can claim. Thus the Raikage ordered the training, as he believed that Naruto might possibly be one of the only shinobi alive that would be able to use all 5 elements in the high ranks due to the sheer amount of raw chakra he had at his disposal. Naturally, Naruto was all for learning. After seeing the many shinobi throwing justice during the battle, he realized how little he knew in reality. He literally only had Rasengan and its variants, plus Kage Bushin. Despite training under one of Konoha's top ninjutsu specialists for 3 years and his sensei being known worldwide as knowing 1000 jutsu, he never bothered to sit down and learn from them. 2 years passed with still no sign from the masked shinobi. He had learned quite a bit of Tai, Fuin, and ninjutsu from various shinobi from the different villages, thanks of course to his godly use of Kage Bushin. He even got some instruction from Itachi, who had broken the Edo Tensei's control mechanism through Shisui Uchiha's Mangekyo Sharingan. Itachi informed the cages that he was responsible for ending the Edo Tensei controlled by Kabuto, at a great cost. As he unsealed not only Kabuto's deformed head, but Sasuke's as well. Kabuto had used a similar technique as Hidan. When Itachi beheaded Kabuto after their long battle, he watched in horror as Sasuke's own head was separated from his body. The masked shinobi had arrived at that moment, and Itachi gathered the heads of his enemy and brother before fleeing the area. This of course meant that if the masked shinobi knew Edo Tensei, an indestructible Sasuke, Madara and Kabuto would be facing them in the next battle. Itachi didn't know how long his body would last, as he no longer had a source of chakra to draw from. Kabuto was gathering nature chakra with his snake sage mode to empower the resurrected warriors. That source was now gone. After telling Naruto a simpler version of what happened to his little brother, Naruto had surprised him by asking to implant one of Sasuke's eyes, well, his eyes, but he didn't think Naruto needed to know that detail. He felt honored in a way after Naruto had explained his reasoning. I couldn't save Sasuke, maybe this way, he can live on and see the world through me. One day he might witness me bring peace to the world. He hoped he would last long enough to pass on his knowledge to Naruto. As if following a tradition, it was Sakura who had performed the operation, after Naruto's requested her and not Tsunade to do it. She was reluctant to do so and had given him quite the verbal bashing before breaking down to him. Sakura had mentally prepared herself for Sasuke's death. Hell, she had tried to go after him herself after realizing the boy she had loved was gone. But what Naruto was offering, to someone like the man Sasuke had become, she was shocked completely. But she couldn't say no to the smile he wore, the confident grin on his face, so she did as he had asked and replaced his left eye with Sasuke's. It was difficult for Naruto to adjust to the eye. He had to close his normal eye when his Sharingan was open, as it was disorienting when he was sparring. The Sharingan slowed movements down while the normal eye did not. He completely understood why Kakashi kept his covered. The Sharingan didn't seem to be able to turn off even after Itachi explained how. Naruto assumed because he has so much chakra flowing constantly, plus the fact there was no way for him to gain the control necessary to turn off the flow to his eye. To test his theory, he had Neji hit the Tenketsu points leading to his eye and the eye reverted to the black pit he always thought the Uchiha eyes looked like. Channeling some of Kurama's chakra opened the points back up and turned the eye back to the three-tomo state. After many weeks with instruction from Hiashi, Neji and Hinata, Naruto was able to hit the right spot to turn off his eye. When Kakashi saw this he looked completely shocked at the answer was in front of him all these years. Some of the shinobi world's best genjutsu users tried to teach Naruto, but it seemed like a lost cause, even with the Sharingan. Itachi stated it was possible he might be able to use the Sharingan eye illusions, but ordinary genjutsu was thought to be impossible to teach the young 18-year-old Jinchuriki. When asked why he wasn't teaching Naruto some advanced Sharingan techniques, Itachi refused to answer, merely grunting in return to watching Naruto's progress. In tribute to his parents and Jiraiya, Naruto was taught Fuinjutsu from the shinobi world's greatest experts in the field. Surprisingly enough, Killer Bee was one of these, although understanding what he was trying to say was easier said than done. Naruto, staying true to his family's legacy, learned very fast and was considered a prodigy by the field's best, shocking all those that knew him well, as Fuinjutsu was considered one of the most complex of ninja arts. Taijutsu showed great improvements. He trained with resistance seals now. His strength and speed were drastically increasing each day. Thanks to the regeneration of Kurama, he didn't even need to rest. Naruto surprised his trainers, however, by mixing the styles he learned together to match any situation during sparring. It frankly shocked many taijutsu experts as they thought he was a genius, but really he was used to improvising on the spot. Guy even taught him how to open the first gate, to teach him the lotus. From that, Naruto somehow figured out from that how to activate the second gate on his own but didn't try to go any further. Ninjutsu training ironically ended up mainly being his former sensei Kakashi, who might not have been able to perform all the ninjutsu he had copied over the years due to the amount of chakra required, but he could show Naruto the hand signs while explaining what each did. Itachi also helped out in this department, and the Sharingan did wonders at memorizing the hand seals of many of the ninjutsu experts of the shinobi army. Wind and fire were his strongest affinities, while the other three required a much larger chunk of chakra to perform. He felt kind of dirty with learning fire techniques, since it is what the Uchiha clan were famous for. At the same time, he felt honored that he had an affinity similar to his old friend. That thought alone made the blonde giddy in anticipation. The third year since the end of the great battle finally had the masked shinobi strike again, this time with an even larger Zetsu army. The allied forces were hard-pressed and their numbers started to drop one by one. With great reluctance, the Raikage once again decided to let the remaining two Jinchuriki fight, since it appeared they wouldn't win this battle without severe losses. His decision proved to be foolish in the end. As soon as they arrived on the battlefield, they were shocked when B was seemingly pulled by some great force at an insane velocity to the waiting arm of the masked man, then taken away by the same teleportation jutsu the dark-skinned leader had seen, Madara, use at the cage summit. They had all felt the wave of chakra and explosions in the distance, Naruto, having begun thinking of B as his brother during their long time together, took out hordes of Zetsu with a few clones pumping out insanely powerful ninjutsu. It had many of the lower-ranked shinobi nervous, thinking that once the war was over, would the villages split again, thus making this boy the greatest threat in the history of the elemental nations and to each of their villages. Naruto, once done with his duty in defending those he cared for, launched towards the area of the battle, ignoring everyone's pleas for him to stay. With his mastered Kyuubi enhanced form while in Sage mode, Naruto could move at speeds close to the Hirshin. Not even the Raikage with his lightning aura could match him in speed. Reaching the battle, he saw B unconscious on the ground behind Madara and Sasuke. One pair of Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan and another pair of Rinnegan eyes looked coolly at him. Ah, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. I can see you have improved greatly. My eyes can see the confidence and experience. I do hope you prove more capable than that fool, Madara stated, throwing his head back slightly to indicate B. Naruto growled lowly at the statement and his right eye widened, his left being covered with his headband, when he saw the masked man materialize in front of B's body. Get away from him, Naruto roared, his Biju cloak flaring out, pushing a powerful wind in their direction, his voice far more feral in nature. Brother, Sasuke, take him down, soon it will all be over, the Uchiha clan will rule the world at last. Kabuto and I shall extract the Hachibi using Edo Tensei, the masked man stated in a cheerful tone before he and B vanished in a warp. Naruto, still in his enhanced form, snarled. He deactivated his Sage mode for the moment to converse its use for later. Brother. What the hell did he mean, brother? No matter. Look at you two, the mighty Uchiha clan reduced to pawns to a madman. Madara began chuckling darkly. You mean it hasn't been figured out yet? Only one Uchiha was as skilled as me. His body vanished the night I took his eyes. Naruto's eyes widened after remembering Itachi explaining the story. Yes, boy. That was my younger brother, Izuna. Do you know how he is still alive? No. Once the Juubi is formed, I will be given new life and the Uchiha clan will once more rule the world. Naruto's eye widened once more at the revelation and the eye flickered over to the man he once called his brother. Sasuke stood there calmly and raised his eyebrows in curiosity, noticing his former comrade's headband. It's been a while, Dobi. Getting fashion tips from Kakashi. So you stole something from the Uchiha clan too, huh? You two realize how great we are. I thought you were different, but you're just like them. I hear you're Konoha's hero, then you will be the first step to making them suffer. Goodbye, Naruto, Susanoo. A great chakra surged forth and enveloped Sasuke, taking the shape of a giant purple demonic humanoid being, with a strangely shaped bow that was large enough to act as a shield. Naruto said nothing. He had made a promise to Itachi before he dissolved, he would purify Sasuke. He merely lifted his headband and opened his left eye and closed his right, his Sharingan eye glaring at his former friend. A Kage Bunshin seal Leslie popped into existence next to him and he formed a Rasenshuriken. Sasuke's eyes widened when the clone blew a stream of fire into it. Sasuke Uchiha is dead. He died long before this war. He died years ago. He died the day he abandoned Konoha. I'm not a naive child anymore, Sasuke. Everyone was right. While I was just foolish, I realize that now. I'm sorry I failed you, Sasuke. Goodbye, brother. Inferno Rasenshuriken. He tossed the red Rasenshuriken straight towards Sasuke, who merely brought the bow up to block the odd shuriken-shaped jutsu. His eyes widened when the jutsu hit the shield and expanded outwards, the strange chakra human taking the hit. Madara whistled when it hit. The sight was impressive. A large dome formed. Red chakra needles infused with fire chakra rained down on the young Uchiha within a raging inferno of fire. Dust was kicked up from the attack, making it difficult to see if he had succeeded. Even if he did, Naruto knew Sasuke would reform soon enough. Madara was the greater threat. Naruto stood calmly before his eye switched to Madara, who raised one eyebrow. No word needed to be said between them. They both vanished in a blur and began a fierce taijutsu battle. Bangs seemed to erupt in the area from many locations. In reality, it was the sounds of each blow being blocked or parried. Shinra Tensei. Madara roared, blasting the Jinchuriki back. Impressive taijutsu for one so young, and excellent use of the Sharingan. It won't be enough though. The man took off towards the flying yellow figure before it vanished in a poof of smoke, a clone. He was suddenly grabbed from behind. Boom! Madara got a smirk before he exploded into wood pieces that dispelled another shadow clone. Madara rose out of the earth a moment later, a short distance away. Yes, I was told you love clones, so do I. Taju Mokuten Bushin. Multiple stumps formed on Madara's form before rapidly growing and becoming exact replicas, 50 of them total. Let us see which clones are more durable, shall we, boy? Earth release. Great divide. 4 large sections of earth rose to surround the large group of Madaras, who immediately began their own hand signs. Water release. Water pressure wave. Lightning release. Bolt Stream, Collaboration Technique, Lightning Bath. Naruto knew from talking to the cages, Madara wouldn't even consider that a warm-up, but it was only to distract him briefly. He was finishing off a complex array of seals onto 4 Iwa Bushin he had created earlier. Done. Hopefully he still underestimates me. Wood release. Deep forest creation was heard as masses of roots burst through the rock walls. Many Madara wood clones began to burst through the gaps formed. Taju Cage Bushin, 500 shadow clones burst into existence around Naruto and leapt against the smaller number of Madara wood clones. Jutsu was flying all around. Due to them all being clones, they didn't bother holding back at all, so explosions were going off all around. Naruto and the Iwa clones charged towards the real Madara and began a renewed taijutsu battle. This time there were wind blades, hardened fists infused with earth release, and Madara even set a clone alight with his Amaterasu. Enough of this farce. Suddenly rocks began to rise from the debris of the field high in the sky, then collide together, forming a massive ball of rock above the fierce battle. Take this! The meteor erupted into the black flames of Amaterasu and began descending fast, right towards himself and the real Naruto. Madara underestimated Naruto, expecting him to halt to see the attack. The Iwa Bushin latched onto him and Naruto sped through the 10 required hand signs. Fuin. Madara gaped openly as he was sealed a moment later. Naruto channeled chakra to his legs and feet, grabbed the sealed rock containing Madara, tossed it as hard as he could in the direction of the army and bolted out of the area. Skidding just as the massive flaming chunk of rock smashed into the earth, dispelling all of his clones, he panted slightly as the exhaustion from its use, then he calmed himself and activated Sage Mode. His eye widened as he saw it happen just before it did, but he wasn't quick enough to react. A large purple arrow pierced his stomach. How could he have forgotten Sasuke, the insane laughing giving him flashbacks of the last time they met years ago? Sasuke stood up cackling madly to himself as the giant chakra beast was regenerating until it was complete once more, armor and all. You are still Adobe. Madara thought they were training you. I guess he was wrong if that is the best you can do. Just like every fight you've been in, you beat him because you got lucky. Lucky he didn't notice what you were planning, before he fired off an arrow that Naruto barely avoided. But you just used your ace in the hole. What do you plan to do about me, huh? Naruto was staring in shock at the fact the arrow was still lodged in his stomach and he didn't seem to be able to yank it out. Even with Sage Mode and Kurama's chakra flowing through him. More than that was the fact the arrow had come at him faster than anything he had seen, easily matching his speed. He barely was able to dodge the second one that was fired. One of the next 5 connected with him though, and again he was unable to remove it from his thigh. Coughing up blood, he looked up just in time to see Sasuke giving him a sad look. Not good enough, Naruto. Goodbye, brother, and bringing down the bow like a sword and slamming into him. Then his world went black. Naruto groaned when he woke up, noticing he was inside his mindscape on Kurama's head. You just had to get, didn't you, boy? Underestimating your opponent that much. Did you forget he was able to take down that rapping fool and survive an encounter with all 5 cages as well? Not to mention you should have realized he could have reformed quicker than the reports stated. That other Uchiha has had 3 years to plan this assault. Naruto merely responded with a, stupid fox, how was I meant to take that into account? I thought I had another 30 seconds at least to prepare to take down Sasuke. The mighty fox let out a loud roar. What did I just say? Are you really that stupid? Here I am, starting to realize that you might be a worthy host, then you say something stupid like that. Now I'm about to get out of you and forced to become one with the others again, meanwhile you will die because of your stupidity. Naruto threw his hands up in the air. Then what the am I meant to do then, Kurama? I've already lost. The shinobi world has lost. I might have ed up, but there's nothing I can do. So stop bitching like Sakura in her fangirl phase. The Kyuubi let out another roar. You think I want this, to join with the others again? Shut your mouth and think for a change, you fool. Wait, what did we do to further enhance our union? Looking at the strongest Biju in confusion, Naruto snorted. What would? Wait, no, all that would do is likely just speed things up, or what if it? The Kyuubi let out a sigh, knowing that he would fuse with the others one way or the other. The mighty beast would much rather serve an idiot than who he believed the masked shinobi to be. We are now connected, a soul bond if you will, perhaps we can use that to bring the other 8 to us instead, although it would probably kill us both, the combined powers of all 9 of us Biju would likely destroy your body. With luck the backlash will kill that bastard Uchiha though, he would need to be solid to perform the technique, meaning vulnerable. Pausing, the mighty Kitsune let out another roar. As much as I don't want to be a part of that damn raging beast again, it's going to happen anyway. I'd rather die being bound in an idiot like you than serving that bastard Uchiha like a pet after I combine with the others. The Uchiha have caused both of us grief over the years, I think it's time to mess up their plans. It's wrong. Being able to control even a being as great as me with nothing but a glare. You never thought to use me as a tool, even after you got that damn eye. For that at least, I have grown to not want to rip you apart on sight. Best case scenario, it frees the other Biju at once. Naruto stared up in shock at the Kyuubi before he sat down and let out a sigh. But you are linked to me, if my body dies, so would you, but you still want to do this, don't you, Kurama? Sigh. This isn't how I wanted to be remembered, but hey, I already proved I'm the strongest shinobi ever, he. Sitting back and just quitting was never my style. So let's see what fate has in store for us, you great furry bastard. The mighty fox chuckled. Naruto looked shocked since he only ever heard the evil cackle from the beast in the past. Yes, I too am curious to see what will happen to us. In a way, we Biju should never have been born into this world in the first place. That old fool never told us how the Juubi was formed, just that we were born from it. If I somehow survive, I will protect your precious people in your stead. You have my word. The beast roared again and seemed to be in great pain. That hurts, worse than your mother's steaks. Well, now it's just a mind game, let's win this. Naruto gazed at the Kyuubi with a smirk before nodding. Walking over to him, he placed his hand on his snout. The mightiest of the 9 Biju muttered out, "Thank you, brat. For what it's worth, I'm glad you were the one chosen 18 years ago. I hate to admit it, but you could have wiped my existence when we fused our chakra. That damn red-eyed freak plans to do just that, I'm sure." The beast closed his eyes and began to glow. Meanwhile, outside the seal, ha ha ha, finally I have all 9, with my brother sealed. Once the Juubi is formed, I will become the new Jinchuriki of the Juubi and bring this world to its knees. They will forget all out Madara Uchiha. Izuna Uchiha will be cemented in history, Izuna happily gloated. 9 chakra dragons burst forth and connected with Naruto's body, causing it to lift in the air. His mouth and eyes opened and began to glow. Small amounts of red chakra began to leak out of the body into the dragons and flowing towards the statue. Sasuke looked over at him and impassively stated, "What do you mean? You told me you were going to cast a genjutsu on the moon to bring peace." Izuna continued to laugh. "Peace? I once thought like that. I was considered the weaker brother because of it. Now look at where I am. Why would I want peace to a world that has wronged me? I am an avenger just like you, Sasuke. But I have waited far longer to get my revenge. All will suffer, all will die, I will be a god while the rest of the world will lay dead at my feet. The Juubi is too powerful to be controlled by any Kekai Genkai, and with my Sharingan and Rinnegan, I would be unstoppable, ha ha ha." Sasuke narrowed his eyes but said nothing. Not that he could do anything in his body right now. As Naruto said, he's already dead, powerless to do anything but watch. This man had outlived his time. If Sasuke had survived, he would have surpassed him and the Juubi would have been his to use for his vengeance. Now, he was nothing but a puppet, a tool to be used, and he could do nothing to stop it. He kind of wished Naruto had beaten him, perhaps he would see his family on the other side. Izuna suddenly stopped laughing when Naruto's body became shrouded with his odd yellow Biju cloak. Izuna found this strange, as no other Jinchuriki he had witnessed over the years ever took on such an odd form when using their Biju. There was mild rumbling coming from the statue containing the 8 Biju. What is this? It is like he is fighting the pull of the statue. This should be impossible, he stated seriously. His eyes widened when the yellow chakra followed the red chakra to the statue eye. Suddenly all 9 eyes opened at once and the chakra flow suddenly changed direction and began heading towards the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. He shouted out, "What? No, what trickery is this?" Each of the 9 dragons now took on a color representing each Biju. Izuna, fearing the result, tried to cancel the jutsu with his Rinnegan eye but nothing happened, the rumbling just got louder and the chakra flow got faster. His eyes then noticed the seals that were on Naruto's cloak form became more defined and each began to glow a different color, each matching the chakra dragons. What is happening? Is he? No. No. The 9 dragons then left the statue completely and the last of the chakra went into Naruto. Nothing happened and Izuna stared in disbelief for a moment, then the seals on Naruto's form started to glow silver, it began to get brighter and brighter, then suddenly the glowing stopped, the cloak faded and the body dropped to the floor of the chamber. Laughter reigned suddenly in the chamber and both Uchihas turned to see Kakashi, the Raikage, Guy and Itachi, Sharingan ablaze. It was clear that it was the one that laughed. That brat really is the most unpredictable shinobi, isn't he? Even in defeat, somehow he pulled out a win. A then activated his lightning armor. Kakashi unveiled his Sharingan and Guy was already in his 7th gate mode. Izuna let out a loud roar in frustration before he activated his Mangekyo Sharingan and used Kamui on the nuisance that had ruined his plans, making him disappear forever. Naruto, Kakashi roared but Guy beat him and slammed a fist that went straight through Izuna's stomach. Kakashi finished him off with a Raikiri through his heart. Performed a lariat on Sasuke, beheading him before he could react as he was focused on Itachi. "Goodbye, foolish little brother," was what Sasuke read with his Sharingan eye as Itachi beheaded Kabuto, who was trying to make an escape. Now he was free from Izuna's control. With Naruto. When Naruto opened his eyes he found himself on his back in an open field. Confused at where he was, he stood up and gazed around cautiously. The place looked completely barren. He gasped when he looked up to the dark cloudy sky to see a red moon, well more like a giant eye that looked to be projecting a combination of the Rinnegan and Sharingan, 3 tomos on each Rinnegan line spinning wildly. Then he heard a mighty roar from behind. Gulping, he slowly turning around to see a massive 4-limbed creature. Although it was sitting on its hind legs, its body shape seemed very similar to Karuma's. The head, like the rest of the body, was shadowed by the darkness, but Naruto could make horns protruding out the back of it, but the significant feature he saw were the 10 tails swishing behind it. "Well me," Naruto muttered to himself as the beast seemed to grin widely at hearing this, showing off rows of razor-sharp teeth, again similar to Kurama when he's being a furry bastard. Suddenly its eye opened and Naruto blinked a few times, as it was basically a red Rinnegan with 3 tomo on each line like the moon in the sky. Hi there big fella." The beast let out another feral roar before looking at Naruto again. "Well, this was unexpected. It would appear we all survived." Naruto's blinked at the familiar tone in the beast's voice. "Kurama, that you?" The beast roared again. "Sort of, not really, I guess." "Arging Shukaku, crazy bastard is messing up our mind. I am the Juubi, so no, I'm not Kurama, completely. However, looking at the memories I contain, you are most familiar with Kurama and Yuki, but you have come into contact with the others, but you may continue calling me one of these if you wish, unless I think of a more fitting name." He gazed around the area they were in before he continued. "Interesting, no cage, but different to the fusion Kurama and you went through, none of the others experienced it either. It is most similar to that, however. It appears you retained most of the chakra from Kurama before our fusion, so your body survived the process. However, I will warn you, do not release more than 4 taels worth of my power, so never go beyond that until your chakra reserves increase. I am over 5 times the strength of Kurama from what I can feel. But that is probably underestimating my strength." The massive beast grinned once more. Very creepy in Naruto's opinion. Thanks to me, your chakra will start increasing to compensate you for holding me. Luckily, since you already contained the strongest part of me, you are able to handle me in the first place. The Hachihi's host would not have survived the process. I'm surprised we did too. Naruto scratched his head for a moment, then sat down and looked at the beast with narrowed eyes. So how are we still alive though? Scrap that, probably just my insane luck streak. Where are we? Are we still in that cavern? Cause I'd bet that Uchiha guy is pissed off right now. I do not know where we are. At Naruto's startled look, he elaborated, its red eye spinning, as if trying to bore into his mind. You need to wake up to discover that. Naruto's sweat dropped at that obvious statement before focusing on waking up. He was launched back to consciousness. Opening his eyes, he saw it was night and he was in a forest that looked very like the forests surrounding Konoha, if slightly different. That made no sense to him, however, as he should have been nowhere near this area. In fact, he was at least a week away and he doubted the man that spent so long hunting him would just dump him in such a place. Standing up, he felt slightly stiff, making him wonder how long he was there. Then again, it might be due to his chakra reserves getting a boost, so did a few stretches to loosen his joints. He did a few katas as a test before bit his thumb along a seal on his left bicep. A scroll poofed out of it and the seal faded away. Naruto knew how messed up his clothes looked after his battle with Madara and the 2 large holes from Sasuke. The scroll contained spare clothes, black Anbu-style pants, a black shirt with a red Uzumaki symbol on the front and his usual black and orange jacket. He left it partly open at the top before he put on his sage cloak on his back, red cloak with black flames on the bottom. He tapped his Tenketsu point to shut off his Sharingan and launched into the trees heading in the direction of his village. Naruto's eyes immediately widened when he saw the destruction at the entrance to the village with bodies and blood scattered around the village. He swore loudly as he thought this was some sort of sick revenge request of Sasuke's. Ninja were tending to the wounded and sealing up the dead into scrolls. He saw a ninja nearby and jumped towards him. He didn't recognize the man, but he didn't know many of the ninjas in the village before he called out, "Hey, what the hell happened here? Was it that masked bastard?" The ninja turned to the new voice and narrowed his eyes at the stranger. Since he didn't recognize him, the mismatching eyes threw him off too, but he quickly shook off any suspicion. The man looked much like their beloved Hokage and he was looking at the wounded with barely concealed rage. He meant them no more harm. Naruto raised an eyebrow after gazing around the area again, waiting for a response. Unlike many in the shinobi army, Naruto only wore a Konoha headband. Since he wasn't officially a part of the army, the man sighed when he finally looked at it. Where have you been hiding? The Kyuubi just attacked the village. Yondaime-sama just took the beast out of the village with his teleportation jutsu. Naruto took in the information calmly on the outside, but inwardly he was swearing up a storm. I'm sorry, it's just you look just like him. I was under the impression he had no living relatives. Never mind, excuse me, I have to get these guys to safety. Can you help? Naruto didn't even respond, just created a few kage bushin and nodded to the wounded. Naruto's eyes carefully turned towards the Hokage monument and he ignored the man's gasp at seeing his nonchalant use of such a chakra-costly technique. These guys are yours, they'll follow your orders, he stated as his eyes widened in shock at what he saw. Only 4 faces, where was Tsunade Ba-chan? The Kyuubi just attacked. The Yondaime is fighting it. How can this be? The Juubi, hearing his thoughts, stated, somehow our merger caused a tear in space and time, or you just got lucky again, could also be that eye technique Kumui. Naruto froze in place and tried to calm his nerves. Back in time, does that mean that mum and dad are still alive? He heard a roar in his mind before a menacing growl. Focus, kid, you're from the future, this must never be revealed to anyone. Yes, your parents might still be alive, if you hurry. Naruto took a deep breath before he responded. Well, you don't need to tell me twice. Time to kick some Kurama. The Juubi made a whining-like sound. How did I ever deal with such stupidity on a daily basis? Kurama must have built up a tolerance for it. Be cautious. If this is a past, We don't know the rules, this might not be your time, it could be another dimension for all we know, tread carefully. Naruto paled and muttered under his breath, "Oh God, what if Orochimaru is my father here?" Before he turned to the ninja who informed him, "I'm going to go help him out if I can. If you need more clones, tell one of them to dispel, I'll send some more." Naruto was about to take off towards the faint red glow in the distance, but he found he couldn't move. "I'm afraid we can't let you leave until you tell us who you are." Shikaku Nara stepped into view flanked by Shuza Akamichi and Inoichi Yamanaka. Much younger looking, but they still looked relatively the same as he remembered seeing them only a few short hours ago. "My name is Naruto, shadow user, scar on your face, you must be Shikaku Nara." All four shinobi present stiffened at the knowledge. "No offense, but I have no time to talk, I have to aid the Yondaime." Naruto channeled chakra to the point it became visible, then he broke out of Shikaku's shadow hold with ease. He nodded to them, ignoring the looks before vanishing. Being highly trained ninja, they followed his movements, making him look like a red and yellow blur. He arrived just as his father yelled out, "Fuin," sealing a large portion of Kurama's chakra into himself, weakening the furball considerably, at least temporarily. Biju regenerate their chakra using nature energy, so the beast would only be weakened for a few minutes. Landing nearby the Sandaime and two Junin who were looking at the new arrival in shock, he muttered, "For sake, damn it, I'm too late. Wait, no, I can still do that." Before he charged up a Rasengan and slammed it into the barrier, pushing more and more chakra into it until a hole opened up and he dove through it, before it closed up. "Oh Lord Sandaime, did he just easily force his way through the barrier we tried ourselves to break through with no success?" With ease, the grizzled old warrior just looked dumbly at the blonde stranger that ran towards the Kyuubi with a battle cry and simply nodded. The Jonin sighed before stating, "I hope he's on our side then. I suppose you want my chakra now, let's see if you can handle it." Because Naruto hadn't mastered all the Juubi's tails like he did Kurama, when he channeled the beast's chakra, he was shrouded in a chakra coat, channeling more of the Juubi's chakra. His eyes turned silver with black slits, he shut his right eye before his left eye began to morph due to chakra channeling through it. When he channeled Kurama's chakra, his Sharingan remained red, due to that being the color of the chakra. However, oddly enough, the Juubi's chakra caused the Sharingan to turn into a silver eye with 3 tomo. His whiskers thickened considerably, one tail stuck out, which split into 2, shortly after 2 more tails came out. Naruto let out a feral roar that echoed throughout the area. He appeared behind his mother and father in time to block Kurama's claw from piercing them. He threw the claw back, making the 9-tailed fox land on his back. He quickly went through hand seals and pinned down the beast with chakra chains like his mother had shown him in his mind. Hers required no hand signs, Naruto just used an imitation. "You Kurama." The beast that was writhing around in rage froze in place and stared at Naruto with his jaw actually open. The mighty fox's eyes were just as wide, more so when he saw the number of tails and the sheer power for chakra. How? Who? Wah? Naruto ignored the stunned beast, released his shroud, turning off his Sharingan with the Tenketsu point and turned to his parents who were watching him in shock and awe. Naruto rubbed the back of his head in a familiar manner to all present and put on a big cheesy grin before he stated, "Hi." The witness's eyes widened in complete shock before Naruto turned serious. "I'm sorry, but you need to finish what you started, Minato. I didn't get here in time. If I did, maybe you could have survived, but you've made the deal with the Shinigami with the Shikifuin. There was a reason the seal was forbidden. Kushina, you also are too low on chakra, and having a Biju ripped from you is fatal. I'm shocked you're still alive, but you are an Uzumaki after all." Naruto sighed before he looked at them intently. "However, I might be able to help you be a part of your son's life in a way, if you each have enough chakra to create a kage bushin that is. It will be far more permanent than just leftover chakra you were planning on inserting into him anyway. Once his chakra reserves are big enough, you will be able to enter his mindscape, technically be able to see and talk to him as she sleeps or enters her mindscape herself. Since I stopped the furball here, you should have enough chakra to be put into the seal I'll create. Minato got over his shock, processed the information given the fastest and stated, while I'm impressed of your knowledge, power and obvious sealing skills if what you state is possible, you did get one piece of information wrong. At Naruto's questioning glance wondering what he got wrong, his mother had told him this story first hand after all. I have a newborn daughter, Naruto, not a son. But if you can what you stated, then I would be grateful. I hope I'll have enough chakra left. Minato checked over the ceiling pedestal he prepared for Naruto, so only Kushina saw Naruto's eyes bug out and jaw drop in shock. Kushina looked at her currently crying daughter to the speechless man in front of her and noticed the similarities: blonde hair, blue eye, the other eye kind of looked like Makoto's, hell even the whisker marks on their cheeks. Hell, he could probably pass as the father to her little girl at first glance. Seeing as her husband trusted the stranger enough, she too focused her chakra for one last time. She could feel the life fading and knew even without the offer she would die. She was stubborn but not stupid. Naruto nodded seriously before he bit his thumb and ran it along the back of his right hand, producing an ink bottle and brush. He asked for a sample of their blood. Knowing the reasons as both being seal masters themselves, they did as instructed. Naruto mixed the blood into the ink and began drawing fluidly and quickly. When done, he nodded and they each took their turn to channel enough chakra for a kage bushin into the seal. Naruto nodded before he ran through rapid hand signs. Fuin, the seal glowed before fading from view. Minato then summoned the toad to hold the seal key and ordered the toad to go and store itself within Jiraiya. Who are you? Kushina asked. She looked weak and her eyes looked slightly glazed over, showing she didn't have much time left. He closed his eyes for a moment and entered sage mode briefly. He scanned immediate area and made sure no one, even with chakra-enhanced hearing, should be able to hear if he answered her. As he was remembering the Juubi's warning, said beast interrupted, "Kid, she's gonna die anyway. This might be the only time you can talk to your parents in the flesh." Minato had done the hand seals for the sealing, so his chakra was ready to perform the action. The Shinigami was floating behind him, but he waited a moment to hear the strange man's answer. He still had strength enough left for that. Naruto, not taking any chances with the old monkey so close, walked over to them and talked low enough so the Sandaime couldn't hear. "I don't know how, but I think somehow that masked bastard you just faced Minato sent me here, from another time." At the look of disbelief on his parents' faces, he sighed and ran his hand through his hair. "We don't have enough time for a full rundown, so I'll give you the simple version. I thought I went back in time, but it's something else since you have a daughter, not a son. Trust me, it should be a boy. I should know." Confusion was written on both their faces for a moment, playing his words through their heads. Kushina looked back and forth between her baby and the strange man. Suddenly her eyes widened in shock and she gasped, catching Minato's attention. "Why, you're our child, aren't you?" Naruto smiled at his mother. "Well, I guess I wasn't as vague as I thought." "Yeah, 18-year-old Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Nice to meet ya, Mom, Dad," he finished with a chuckle. Minato looked at him with narrowed eyes, as if he saw him as a threat, but after a moment he suddenly got a bright grin. "Well, I see that you turned out strong, son. I have to ask, since you changed my original plan with that seal, I take it I did that with you, so did I, ever explain to you why?" Naruto held up his hand. "There wasn't much time left to finish up. You did. When I went berserk when I thought someone important to me was murdered, I had almost released the Kyuubi in my rage. You stopped me before I tore off the seal. I was angry at first because of how I was treated by the village growing up, but I got over it. I strove to make you both proud of me. I might not have known you were my father until I was 15, but I always wanted to surpass the Yondaime Hokage though." Kushina was crying even harder. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Naruto wasn't sure what to do at first. He looked at his father for some sort of idea, then noticed a very distraught look in his eyes too. Naruto didn't understand when his mother seemed even more upset than before at his reaction, until he remembered meeting his mother in his mind. when he apologized and she hugged him, causing him to stiffen. Naruto's brain was on overdrive, thinking of what he could say to fix what he did. Are you really such a fool? A memory from 1 year ago popped into his mind, Kuretsuchi smacking him over the head when he upset Hinata, from how close they were training together and how often they looked ruffled. Then, having no idea going to fix the misunderstanding, Kuretsuchi, remembering her uncle Roshi, sighed before whispering in his ear once she realized he truly had no idea what to do. Naruto's eyes widened and he pulled Kushina into a hug and kissed her on the forehead. I forgave you years ago, Mum. I was never angry at you. As I told you in my mindscape, it was your love for me that kept me going. Somehow, despite everything everyone said, I just knew you didn't hate me. Somehow I knew that no matter how alone I felt, what people said about what you thought of me, that my mother and father did love me. I'll make sure your daughter doesn't experience that sort of life. That's a promise of a lifetime. Then Naruto backed up and gave a guy pose, and that's my Nindo. I never go back on my word, Datbeo. Kushina glomped him even harder than before and began crying her eyes out in what sounded like howls. Last time I tried this on someone it worked. Then he mouthed help, his eyes wide towards his father who had his own tears coming down his face with a smile. Then he realized advice he gave to young Inari in Wave, it's okay to cry if you're happy. Naruto then beamed back at his father, with a matching big cheesy grin on his face. Minato was shocked at the insinuations his son was making. It was a dream, he knew, for his village to treat his daughter as a hero, but his hope for the old man to keep watch over her gave him hope at least. He realized how foolish and selfish his current move was, but his son had forgiven him, looking back at his newborn child. Minato sent a silent prayer that his daughter would forgive him one day too. At least he could die at the very least knowing that his daughter would be protected, even if wasn't him or Kushina. He wanted to ask him about his life, his skills, his ninja missions, girlfriends, friends. But he had a job to do and his chakra was fading fast. With that seal his son made, maybe one day some form of him will hear all that. With that in mind he shook his head with tears coming down and nodded once before he clapped his hands and yelled out, Hake no Fuin Shiki, 8 trigrams divination sealing style. The ghostly hand of the Shinigami shoved its way through his gut causing the young Hokage to grunt in pain. The hand latched onto the Kyuubi, going through a few hand seals he placed his hand gently on his daughter's stomach. The chakra beast was pulled into the seal cursing the whole way and Minato fell to the ground, his life slowly fading away. Kushina also seemed close to death. She looked up at Naruto and cupped his cheek softly. Please, protect her, my son. She was smiling with her eyes closed as her body slumped. Minimum. Naruto, understanding her last wishes, carried her over to his father and lay her beside him. Her hand reached out and held his. The barrier fell and the Sandaime turned order the two Junin to silence to what they witnessed and cursed when they weren't there. They would now surely notify the village of the young Jinchuriki before he approached the group. To at least hear his successor's wishes and perhaps discover what the hell had happened that night. His wife still hadn't contacted him and he felt the truth, she was killed. His gaze turned to the newcomer who looked down at the young couple with an odd expression. The man known as the professor didn't need to hear what was said between the three shinobi, however he clearly saw they were trusted him so he didn't attack the stranger. Minato, you fool, I could have done it in your place. Why did you erect the barrier? Why did you use such a sealing in the first place, your own daughter? Minato managed to let off a grin and tried to focus on the old man. You wouldn't have been strong enough, old man. I barely managed it. Kyuubi can't be contained in anything but a person, and Uzumaki. The aged Hokage nodded with tears starting to come down. What would you like me to do, Minato? As a Jinchuriki of the demon that just attacked, the villagers will not see her as a hero holding back the beast. You know this from the cases from other villages. I can only do so much. Here Minato smiled weakly once more. Naruto will raise her. We trust him. He is family. His eyes widened at the request before he turned to the newcomer who had tears coming down his eyes and he let out a sigh. I will see to it, my friend, on the lives of my family, I will see it done. Minato died moments later with a smile on his face. His wife turned to Naruto and smiled at him. Good. Bye. Ru-2. With that last word, Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze joined her husband, the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze. Naruto kneeled and closed both their lifeless eyes. If only I was faster. I'm sorry for not protecting you. Rest, Kushina Uzumaki, Minato Namikaze, I will take care of your legacy, you have my word. Pulling out a blank storage scroll, he wrote a quick seal before sealing his parents into them. To protect them from those who would want their secrets, they both have their enemies, I will find an appropriate place to bury them. Hiruzen Sarutobi bowed his head in respect before he turned to the newcomer. We have much to discuss, Naruto. Naruto sighed again before mentally considering what to say. Minato already said they were family, and he did look more like her than his mother. No last name. I never knew my parents. Namikaze, I guess. Minato was considering officially adopting me, but considering I'll be raising young Naruto, I think I better take her mother's name. Hiruzen let out a sigh of his own. Yes, that does sound like something Minato would do. And you are right, it would be safer for the village and young Naruto that she not take on her father's name. The fact you broke through that barrier with ease and that you appear to be a Jinchuriki yourself, shows you are more than capable of defending her. But you can't be everywhere at once. Yes, your idea is sound. We should discuss this in more detail in the Hokage Tower. Sigh, I just can't get out of that seat, damn you Minato. Naruto cringed slightly at the words. He trusted his Gigi with his life, but this man wasn't his Gigi. Naruto was nothing more than a stranger who happened to look like his successor and claimed to be family, but with Minato's own words, it was clear there was some truth. A DNA test would fix any queries up easy enough. Hopefully the fact Naruto is a girl won't cause his DNA to be identical to hers though. He sighed internally but didn't panic as he would have in the past. Lead the way. Hokage-sama. The old man grumbled and looked to age drastically in a short span. To Hiruzen, however, all he could think about was all the paperwork this disaster will cause, the funeral planning, costs to rebuild as well as the sheer military losses that were caused that night. It wasn't something to look forward to. Thankfully young Naruto would be a quick fix for Naruto so he wouldn't have to worry about the girl. He had a few plans to discover if this boy was being truthful anyway. For now, he sensed no ill intent so he wasn't too concerned. Yes, as a fellow Jinchuriki you would be the most suited to raising another. However, I will need you to attend a council meeting with me to go over the details with them all, such as your admittance into our forces, since I know all the shinobi in the village and I do not know you from our ranks. There is also another matter that would be throw off the council. At Naruto's questioning glance he continued, few civilians knew about Kushina being pregnant, she had a powerful genjutsu on her to hide the fact, many shinobi from main clans would likely know unfortunately. Now Naruto is the child of the feared Yellow Flash of Konoha. If word of her existence got outside Konoha walls, there would be assassins knocking all the time, meaning diverting resources to keep her safe from outside and within our walls. The wise old Hokage made a point to look at both the baby on the pedestal who oddly enough was sleeping in himself. However, you and Naruto are both so strikingly similar, with your whisker-like facial marks, you could claim she is actually your biological daughter. Hell, we might even convince some of the clan heads, especially if we do a DNA test to prove it. You are so similar to Minato, your DNA might be as well. But I can arrange for results to be altered if need be. I don't wish to do this to Kushina or Minato, of course, it is in a way disrespectful, however it would keep people from learning the truth and you could tell Naruto the truth when you feel the time is right. Naruto blinked before chuckling softly to himself. I see now why you are known as the professor. The issue I have is that would that mean if those DNA results were leaked, they may assume I'm actually the one that knocked up Kushina. The Hokage had a sparkle in his eye, as if it were an ingenious idea. Meanwhile, Naruto was shitting himself. How could he state he was romantically linked to his own mother? He let out a loud sigh, but the Hokage let out a soft chuckle. Naruto looked down at Naruto, who looked so peaceful and innocent. He couldn't help but wonder if that was what he once looked like. With the additional appendage attached to the lower region, of course. Frowning in thought, he saw the baby squirming and gazed down at her in fascination, so tiny and vulnerable, a small tuft of blonde hair and the similar whisker marks on her cheeks. Pulling out another scroll, he pulled out a blanket. With his kunai enhanced with wind chakra, he cleanly cut a section out. He felt the intense gaze of the Hokage but ignored it to focus on his task. Resealing what remained of the blanket, he carefully lifted Naruto and expertly began wrapping it around the baby up as gently as possible. The worried look in his eye caused a soft chuckle to escape the newly reinstated Hokage's lips once again. He remembered seeing that look from the memories of Kage Bunshin watching him handle his own sons. Naruto looked up at the sky and thought to himself, I really am one lucky, unpredictable shinobi, Kakashi-sensei. He found himself not wanting to return to the war-torn future, the many deaths of those he called friends over the years, Jiraiya's death. He really hoped this wasn't a dream and began walking towards the village. Besides, with the Sandaime Hokage, the first person that showed him love. Hiruzen Sarutobi, one of the sole survivors of all three ninja world wars. Wise, seasoned, hardened warrior and diplomat, as well as being one of the longest-running Kages in the history of the elemental nations. He was renowned as the Professor or Kami no Shinobi, God of Shinobi, throughout the world, for his prowess and skill on and off the battlefield. The aged Hokage couldn't help but look fondly at the young man walking beside him. In truth, he was studying him in more detail. Simple gestures can say more than many words, as the Hyuga clan state. Naruto gazed at the young baby that now held one of the greatest secrets and burdens of Konoha history, such a role for one so young. Unlike her predecessors, young Naruto didn't have the privilege of having her burden unknown to the rest of the village. Naruto simply seemed mystified at the little bundle, just as any father would, the first time they see their child for the first time. Every time she twitched, Naruto would react and gain a small smile on his face. Curiosity was playing on his mind as to what could be going through Naruto's head. Hiruzen also took time to look at Naruto closely. His resemblance to Minato was uncanny. They could have been brothers. Hell, he couldn't help but wonder if they were possibly brothers. The Jinchuriki used the Rasengan to break through the barrier, and that was one of Minato's prized jutsus. It can't be copied just by observation, you have to understand the mechanics behind it. Minato must have taught him. What plagued Hiruzen was when this could have been. As they headed towards the village, Naruto's posture was relaxed and calm, as if he had walked the forests surrounding Konoha many times. It showed a shinobi that had no need to survey his surroundings, a shinobi that had already knew the layout like the back of their hand. But how could Naruto have managed this without one of his old Anbu, his old teammates, Danzo, or even Jiraiya notifying him of the new face in his village? Paying more attention to the young lad's attire, his eyes narrowed for a moment when he caught the Uzumaki symbol on his t-shirt. Konoha used it on their uniforms from the Alliance during the Shadaime's time as leader. Possibly a coincidence, but Kushina clearly trusted him, Minato too, by asking for his permission to allow Naruto to raise his daughter. Hiruzen didn't think even Jiraiya would have been given that right. Then there were the eyes, mismatched. While one looked just like Minato's, the other eye looked like a member of the Uchiha clan. That eye could cause you problems, but, interesting, I wonder what would happen if I did. This the Juubi muttered to himself as he burst a surge of chakra into Naruto's eyes. Ah! Naruto yelled out and his left hand shot to his eyes. His right safely cradling Naruto. What the? Wary instantly, Hiruzen pushed all his senses to maximum and tried to determine the source of causing the young's sudden pain. But he couldn't sense anything amiss. Turning back to Naruto, he saw the young man blinking rapidly. What the did you do, hole? Naruto quickly determined after pushing his own senses out that it wasn't an attack, the great chakra beast within him was the cause. Just a little gift. No need to concern yourself, the Juubi responded, then pushed more chakra into the eyes. Naruto grunted as he half expected the second wave of pain to hit his eyes. Then why do my eyes feel like they are on fire? Oh, I'm just fixing that little red eye problem you have. Don't forget, we're in a time where there are many Uchiha running around. So I'm merely swapping, copying and playing with the DNA a little bit, no biggie, this should do it. One massive surge, far bigger than the previous assaulted Naruto's eyes, and he let out another pained grunt. There we go, you'll thank me later. I'm not too sure how I knew to do that. I'm going to sleep. With that, great snores could be heard, echoing through the barren lands within Naruto's mind. Naruto's angry retort was removed when he felt a hand touch his shoulder. His eyes snapped to greet the Hokage, who gasped loudly, let me guess, something happened to my eyes. Naruto himself was confused. It looked like when he used his Sharingan, he could make out every single feature on the old man at a glance. The difference being, it wasn't disorienting, which meant it was both his eyes. Moments earlier, Hiruzen was actually slightly worried, as now he could feel pulses of that strong silver chakra that enveloped the boy when he took on the Kyuubi earlier, hitting his odd eyes. They were close to the village, and the last thing he needed was the new guy going out of control within his village. Just as he was about to take action, he felt the pulses stop. Cautiously he placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, and his eyes widened, letting out a soft gasp when he seemed to look at two silver Sharingan-like eyes. Naruto didn't say anything, just ceaselessly created a Kage Bushin, ignoring the intense glare he seemed to be getting from the Hokage, turned to his newly made clone. Both looked at each other and let out simultaneous sighs. Well, that was unexpected. Naruto tried the method that never worked for him before to turn off the Sharingan and got a curious nod from his clone. Yeah, it's off, boss. Then it's simply dispelled. Turning back to the Hokage, his eyes both now his cerulean blue, he improvised on the spot. It's part of being a Jinchuriki to the one I have got in me. It likes to change the base color of my eyes randomly for some reason. Hurts like a bitch every time though. Inwardly he yelled out, I hope you can actually do that, bastard. Naruto roared into his mind. His only response was an exaggerated snort before snoring was heard again. Closing the link, he continued on his way towards the village. The Hokage deciding to just go with that answer, since Jinchuriki were known to have some odd abilities, but that silver Sharingan was something he would get an answer to, but for now he had other matters to attend to. The broken down gates of the village were within sight now. The reinstated Hokage's heart tightened when he saw the state his village was in. Gazing at Naruto again, he was surprised to see the genuine sadness in his eyes. Something like that is difficult to fake for a place you do not care for. Hiruzen would discover his story, or he was not the man who had lived so many years. They walked through the village, Hiruzen shaking his head sadly at the panicking civilians. He was again surprised when the man once more sly called out, Taju Kage Bushin, and his mouth actually fell open at the sheer amount of clones. There had to be at least 100 of them. Aid whoever needs help, scatter. The clones didn't need to be told twice and vanished in multiple directions. Sure, Hiruzen knew how much chakra Jinchuriki had, but that amount was unbelievable, plus the fact Naruto didn't even seem winded from it, as if it were second nature to him to produce so many clones. This again baffled him, how he could get in and out of the village undetected. True, he might have been using a henge, but his all-seeing Hokage ball, plus the detection barrier, should have alerted him to such a powerful shinobi entering his village. So how did he get past one of the best safeguards the village held? Sighing inwardly, he knew it would be pointless to continue this line of thought. The boy looked to be no threat. The truth would reveal itself in time. Many people looked at the Yondaime lookalike in awe, curiosity at his appearance, the sheer amount of copies that were aiding them all over, or perhaps they were told how he tossed the Kyuubi aside like a misbehaving mutt. Or, as Naruto liked to believe, maybe he just looked that awesome with his sage cloak on. When they looked at Naruto in his arms though, some of them turned their expressions to hate and glares. I guess those Junin I saw when I arrived at the barrier have spread word about Naruko Gigi, and my bitch slapping Kyuubi around. Sweet dropping over the nonchalant answer of taking on the strongest of the Biju, he did observe that he nodded. It seems they already are thinking of her as the demon itself, since she is weak and they can channel their anger towards her. I don't know what would have happened if you had not arrived, Naruto. Since I formed the council, decisions are based on vote. Naruko would not have been placed with a family as an orphan. I would only have been able to have my most trustworthy Anbu watch her for so long. Due to the current state of the village, we would have to increase higher missions to get the funds to get back on our feet. Plus, none of the major clans could take her or provoke dispute with the others. Naruto sighed before looking up at the sky. Hated, all Jinchuriki are by some, it varies depending on where they grow up. It could be as little as ignoring her existence to as bad as assassination attempts. Still, I'll be there to help her, but still, the glares may get to her, the hushed whispers, parents telling the other kids to stay away. I don't want her to live a life like mine. Hiruzen looked saddened at hearing this, but he nodded, understanding it was likely true. He had lived a long time, knew full well how Jinchuriki tended to be hated by the locals. The ninja population held more respect but were unable to take an active place raising them, or face the wrath of their comrades. Civilians may see Jinchuriki as demons, ninja, see them as weapons. Any ninja that isn't directly blood-related would be hard-pressed to have other clans or fellow ninja believe they weren't raising a superweon against them. Naruto winced a few times as memories came pouring in, someone mistaking him for the Yondaime at a distance and praising Kami, only for him to land and have them saddened again. Some of the bodies torn apart from Kurama's claws or bodies crushed. Little children crying for the parents. His heart clenched when a clone had found Iruka screaming at an Anbu who refused to bring back his parents. Hiruzen noticed the flinches and changes in expression, but knowing the Kage Bushin himself, he knew of the side effects of receiving the memories, so said nothing. They finally made it to the Hokage Tower and Hiruzen led Naruto to his now once again office. He stated to the Anbu present that Minato-bin had killed in his battle before asking them to gather the council for an emergency meeting. He then activated the sound barrier seals as well as a crib that was sealed on the side of the desk that Minato had installed. Naruto walked over and carefully placed Naruko in it. He turned to see the Hokage looking at him seriously, the friendly nature gone and the look of the leader of a village in full effect. He asked some question he expected Naruto not to answer immediately, but it was his duty, so he asked nonetheless, "Where are you from? How did you get into this village? How did you obtain those eyes?" "I gave Minato my word, but that doesn't mean I trust you, young man." Naruto gazed down at Naruko inside of it. He closed his eyes in thought. He wanted to glare at the Hokage. But Naruto wasn't stupid. He was the leader of the village. Naruto was an unknown. With his Sharingan-like eyes, the old man probably thought he tricked Minato to say what he did in his dying moments. Training with the best, with his own ability to improvise on the spot, Naruto decided to go with the flow as Kakashi used to tell him, tell half-truths and insert lies to deceive. Opening his eyes, he sent a small smile over at the old man. "I was told I was born somewhere on the outskirts of Konoha. Beyond that, I'm not sure where I'm truly from. I've looked for years for information of my parents, but I could never find any. When I got my hands on a bingo book and saw a picture of the yellow flash, well, I thought there could be a possibility we were related." Hiruzen merely pulled out a pipe and lit it before gesturing for Naruto to continue. This much was believable. Naruto thought of Jiraiya and his heart dropped remembering those times. With a small smile he continued, "I'm not really sure how I survived my first few years. I don't really remember anything from that time. But from the time I do remember, I was living in the wilderness, sneaking into villages where I saw people and stole food when I could. One day I came across a campfire with a man who was cooking food. He growled and told me to come out. I wasn't taught talk, but still I somehow understood he meant no harm, so I came out. He sized me and smiled, telling me he would train me to survive. Remembering some of the adventures with Jiraiya, he got a cheeky grin. Over the next 6 years he trained me. In hindsight, I think he was a missing nin. He never told me his name, so I started calling him Aro Sennin, perverted hermit. Hiruzen grew curious at this. It truly sounded like Naruto was describing his student Jiraiya. He was known to take in strays and train them to defend themselves, but surely one who looked like his student would have caused him to bring the boy to the village. So he dismissed the idea for now. He would demand Jiraiya to return. After all, Naruko was his goddaughter. Naruto was now mixing his story with Nagato and Conan's, but it's one that stuck with him. Aro Sennin always stated that I would one day bring peace, so I trained hard to prove myself. It gave me a purpose. A reason to get stronger. Then one day he said he was leaving, that I could take care of myself now. With that alone he merely walked away and left me on my own. Hiruzen ran over what he was told to try and find any plot holes. It seemed eerily familiar to Jiraiya's tale of training the three rain brats, but none of them matched Naruto's description, plus if he were he would be older. One thing that made no sense though came to the forefront, an interesting tale. Naruto, however, you are a Jinchuriki, a human weapon. A tool for a shinobi nation. He saw the look of rage at being called a tool but dismissed it for the moment. No village would have let their Jinchuriki out of their sights, and as far as I'm aware, all the Biju are accounted for. So which do you contain? Naruto stood and walked over to the window with sad look at the village below. He said, I kept training, improving my skills. What was hard was I never knew about my Biju. I only found out when I got in over my head. I was fighting a boy wielding the Hyoten Blo online. Hiruzen eyebrows rose. That bloodline was in Kiri, plus they were talks of their Jinchuriki leader losing his mind. Gesturing Naruto continue, he did so. Simply put, he kicked my. Nearly killed me, to be honest. Before I grew angry, angrier than I'd ever felt before. This was the first time I released the power of my Biju, he said sadly, not wanting to look the man in the eye. Naruto learned an important lesson from Haku that day, in a way the most important lesson of his ninja career. As for what I contain, what number comes after 9? Hiruzen coughed when he inhaled too much smoke at once and stared at Naruto with wide eyes. The oldest living Hokage prided himself on his knowledge. One of the biggest secrets of the ninja world was that the legendary sage was the Jinchuriki of the strongest Biju, supposedly an indiscriminate raging beast that made the Kyuubi look like a puppy, the Juubi. This boy was claiming he contained it. How could that be? The legend spoke that the sage split the beast into 9 pieces, the current Biju that roam the world. Quickly running through scenarios in his head, he let out a sigh, when he realized Naruto likely didn't know how he began the Jinchuriki of the beast from his story. As he had no true idea where he was from, for some reason he had a nagging feeling it had something to do with the battle between his sensei and Madara Uchiha, the reason why the body was never found. That is, frankly, disturbing news, Naruto, for more reason than one. We can discuss more on that and how you infiltrated the village so easily later. Now for those eyes. Sighing, inwardly hoping was right, he looked the Hokage in the eyes before activating them. Seeing the Hokage flinch and lower his gaze to his nose, he said, yeah, I see you didn't earn the title of professor for nothing, Hokage Gigi. According to Big and Ugly in my head, he altered my DNA or something to give me it. What exactly he did, even he doesn't seem to know. His words were, I wonder how I knew how to do that. I'm going to sleep. You talk to it, Hiruzen stated with wide eyes, as Naruto scratched the back of his head and chuckled nervously. Sure, we got a sort of agreement going. I don't piss it off and it doesn't eat me or up my mind. Apparently the constant disturbing talk in your head all the time drives some Jinchuriki to insanity or even suicide to escape it, Naruto said with a shrug, deactivating his eyes. The Sandaime shook his head in disbelief at the explanation that oddly seemed to make perfect sense. A knock on the door startled the Hokage from discussing this topic further. Naruto, your backstory we created during our walk here, about you being Naruko's father. You took on Kushina's name after conceiving young Naruko, so you both have the surname Uzumaki. This is what we will tell the council, understood? I shall handle the paperwork later to hide the trail to the truth. Another knock sounded and Naruto simply nodded. He could sort out the repercussions later. This was an order from his Hokage. The seals deactivated and three, clearly young Anbu entered into the room. Hokage-sama, the council is waiting for you in the chambers. The Anbu all turned to Naruto and proceeded to stare at him. Naruto meanwhile would recognize one of them anywhere. That silver hair gave it away. He never understood why Anbu never hanged their hair while on duty. It's not like gravity-defying hair was common in Konoha, Kakashi's. I assume. He stopped himself from saying sensei just in time. Minato told me about you. I thought you would be taller though. Naruto honestly never remembered how old Kakashi was, but judging from his size and height, we would be around mid-teens. Nonetheless, Naruto gave him a bright smile and scratched his head nervously. Kakashi gasped at what he just heard. How did this blonde guy guess his identity? He might not have been in Anbu long, but still, he was in his getup. Meanwhile, one of the other members chuckled, causing Kakashi to turn and glare at him, which provoked loud laughter. Hiruzen himself couldn't help but chuckle before he stated, "You can remove your mask, dog. You too, Eagle, Cat, tell the council we are on our way." The youngest of the three Anbu saluted before leaving out the door. Turning to the remaining two, Hiruzen continued, "I thought you might like to meet you sensei's relative boys." "How did you know it was him, Naruto?" Naruto blinked in surprise, looking curiously at Eagle. The young man knew both his sensei's teammates died during the Third War. Did his father take on other students before he became Hokage or something? Hokage-sama, does that mean sensei, is he? Hiruzen sighed before nodding sadly. Yes, Obito, I'm afraid he sacrificed himself to seal the Kyuubi into young Naruto there. I know it must be hard for you both. Both boys stiffened at the insinuation and removed their masks. Naruto's eyes widened in shock at the name Obito, then he saw Kakashi with no scar over his eye and both the same color. No Sharingan. Then the second boy, the supposed one that changed Kakashi forever, was looking curiously at him. Sharingan activated. I see. Then I swear to protect Sensei's legacy with my life, the Uchiha stated seriously and nodded respectively to Naruto. So you're related to Sensei? I'm. We can play this game later, Obito, so you're the one with clones running around the village aiding people. Kakashi narrowed his eyes and seemed to size Naruto up. Naruto himself was shocked still. His sensei, the aloof uncaring man, sounded and looked like Sasuke. Shaking his head to clear his thoughts, Naruto turned back to the Hokage. Well, he's short, young, has silver gravity-defying hair. No offense, Gigi, but any Anbu with distinct features like that should really be wearing a henge. Oh, and nice to meet you, Kakashi. Obito, you sure he isn't the Uchiha though? Naruto said, indicating Kakashi. Obito laughed loudly and clapped Kakashi on the back a few times. Said boy looked murderous if that glare he was giving Naruto was any indication. Obito turned back to Naruto. Thank you for the clones though, they are really helping the process. We have confirmed at least 10 cases where some people would have died without their assistance. Hiruzen cleared his thought. As enjoyable as this discussion is, we can have it later, we have pressing matters to attend to now. Kakashi, Obito, put on your masks back on and come with us to the chamber, you may wish to know how Minato died. Kakashi's face twitched before he bowed. Of course, Hokage-sama, he had hoped the rumors of his sensei's death was false, but he had a duty to complete before he could grieve. Nodding, he placed his mask back on, stood at attention. You get used to Mr. Professional over here, Naruto, Obito stated with as much cheer as he could as he was once more reminded of his father figure's death, before copying his teammate. Naruto went over to Naruko and saw her sound asleep still before he picked her up. She stirred slightly and he froze for a moment. He sighed in relief and sealed up the crib, walked out of the room beside the Hokage and the two Anbu following. None saw the small hidden smile under his hat he now donned. When they neared the council chambers, they could hear the heated voices coming from the other side. With a heavy sigh, the Sandaime Hokage straightened himself, slammed the door open and strode into the room, causing instant silence. He went over to take the Hokage seat. Naruto set up the crib and the boys stood guard at the entrance. Naruto quickly drew silencing seals around the crib before activating them. The room was watching the man curiously. On the way to the tower, they had seen many clones running about, aiding the villagers and shinobi alike. The civilian side didn't truly understand the significance of that many clones, but the shinobi side did. From the sheer number of solid clones alone, this stranger must have at like Biju-sized chakra reserves. A few Junin were already spreading the word that he produced an odd chakra the clan heads recognized as a chakra cloak of a Jinchuriki. As Naruto stood and turned around, he took in their expressions, from the hard, calculated looks of Danzo Shimura, Shikaku Nara and Fugaku Uchiha, to the more curious looks of Sum Inuzuka, Choza Akimachi and most of the civilian side. Then indifferent shinobi faces of Hiashi Hyuga, Shibi Aburame, Inoichi Yamanaka and the Hokage. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and gave a goofy smile. Hi. Hiruzen cleared his throat, gaining everyone's attention before he stated, as I'm sure you're all aware, I am in the Hokage seat once more, as Minato lost his life against the Kyuubi. Mutters broke out, but as soon as the Hokage cleared his throat loudly, we will discuss that in a moment. He gestured to Naruto before announcing, this is 18-year-old Naruto Uzumaki, formally adopted by Kushina into her clan. She told me herself in her last words that Naruto was family. I shall gather the correct documentation to prove it at a later date. Minato too seemed aware of it. I have already questioned him and believe him not to be a threat to the village. No offense, Hokage-sama, but my Kikaichu are unsettled. This young man appears to have chakra rivaling Kyuubi itself at least. Just who is he? Shibi Aburame stated in a monotone voice. Naruto suddenly thought that Shino was an overexcited child compared to this guy. Mutters broke out again and many of the counselors turned to their leader, awaiting an answer to Shibi's question. Kami, his chakra is so dense, he also appears to have more tenketsu points, almost as if, Hiashi Hyuga's eyes widened for a moment and he deactivated his eyes and gazed Naruto a curious gaze. My assessment is the same as Abaruame and Hyuga, where your chakra is like a strong flame, Hokage-sama, this boy's is like an controlled inferno. His chakra is even denser than Kushina Uzumaki. The only person I've seen with even something to compare to this is Kumo's Jin. Fugaku Uchiha eyes widened as he gave himself his own answer. The Hokage let out a sigh, knowing that with 3 chakra sensors on the council, it would be impossible to delay this information much longer. How they would take that the village now contains 2 demons, or 2 superweapons is another matter. Shikaku then raised his head and asked, can you prove your claims? Yondaime-sama or Kushina knew you, how do we know that they really trusted you? The Hokage might believe you, but we aren't the Hokage. The room as a whole nodded to each other, all wanting to know the answer to this question as well. Knowing the simplest way was to merely show them some techniques, Naruto went through a few hand signs, earth release, dense rock wall, a large glob of mud spewed out of his mouth, that grew and hardened into a thick rock wall. He then raised his arm to it, something Kushina taught me, out of his arms golden chains flew out and wrapped tightly around the rock slab, tight enough to cause cracks on it. I have witnessed Kushina Uzumaki use this technique, although they appear from her back, Hiashi commented, now with a look of curiosity on his face. Naruto acknowledged the man's words before he stated, proof Minato taught me something he would only teach to those he trusted. Gasps were heard throughout the room, including the door where 2 young Anbu were watching with wide eyes. Naruto then vanished and appeared in front of the rock wall, bringing his arm forward with a shout of, Rasengan. The Rasengan tore through it like tissue paper. Naruto held up the Rasengan to show it was still intact before dispelling it. All the civilians had slight fear in the eyes while the shinobi side were looking at him intently. To do damage like that with 2 techniques, one to capture, the other to execute. Turning his eyes to Shikaku, he raised his eyebrows. The lazy man merely grunted out, very well, I believe you. Uzumaki. Yondaime-sama would not have taught you one of his prized jutsu or used who I assume is your daughter from the similarities I can see. If he didn't believe you could be trusted. The room was silent for a moment processing this. Danzo took that moment to speak. The Yondaime's birth parents were unknown, so there is another option. Tell me, Uzumaki, did the Yondaime believe you to be a blood relative? Mutters broke out as that possibility could be true. Naruto shrugged, we've never really tested it. DNA tests could be altered, so he was considering using a blood seal test. I believe the Hokage was going to test me with that method if the DNA test proved positive. Naruto noticed many who knew enough about Fuinjutsu narrowed their eyes in thought. If he was related, nothing would happen but the seal releasing what it was meant to. But if it didn't, the seal would drain the user of their chakra, usually leading to chakra exhaustion, then death, but with this boy's sheer amount, that could prove dangerous. Naruto noticed the surprised look on the old Hokage before mentally smirking. Then a pink-haired woman Naruto assumed to be Sakura's mother spoke. What happened to the Kyuubi Hokage-sama? Hiruzen took out his pipe and lit it, knowing this could get ugly before he stated calmly, I'm sure it has already reached your ears, Haruno, since Naruto and I saw some glares on the way to the tower. Also very astute of you to pick up that little fact. Shikaku, Minato traded his life to seal the beast into Naruko Uzumaki, the daughter of Naruto here. The room suddenly went silent as they watched Naruto carefully to see if he was angry at this happened to his daughter. The civilians were confused when he seemed fine with the sealing. Why would he want his daughter to be a demon? Many of the shinobi were curious of him too. Uzumaki, I'm sorry for the loss of your daughter. But the demon must be K. A civilian council member began but didn't finish when there was suddenly a dense killer intent in the room. Even the Hokage was sweating under the pressure. Then suddenly it was gone when Naruto heard crying and he quickly appeared over to the crib and picked Naruko up. Naruto began gently rocking and sending coups to his younger counterpart to calm her down. I'm sorry, little Naruko, I didn't mean to scare you. A few moments later she calmed down and Naruto placed her carefully back in the crib. He turned around and sent a glare at the man who had spoken before. He didn't use ki again though. My daughter is not dead, she is right here, counselor. Know the difference between the demon and the container. Also, a biju cannot be killed, weakened yes but not killed. If Naruko here was to die, the Kyuubi would be gone only temporarily, it would eventually reform to wreak havoc once more. You would only get maybe a few weeks of peace, then it would return to do what it started. Why do you think humans are used to seal the beasts away, idiot? She is keeping it safe from everyone. If Naruko dies, the Kyuubi would take a while to reform, maybe more along the lines of a year. Because it was sealed near Konoha, Kurama would probably flee the area or just use a Bijudama to wipe Konoha from a distance to avoid the same fate. The statement he used would help keep Naruko safer with luck. How do we know the demon won't influence the girl, boy? Looking over at the civilian who spoke, Naruto recognized him as one who always refused to serve him as a child. Glaring, he stated, you really have such little faith in your recently passed Hokage's abilities. Pausing for a moment and inwardly laughing at the look on the man's face as he received glares from around the room. The young Jinchuriki continued, the seal Yondaime-sama used is forbidden for a reason, not just because it requires the soul of the caster. However, it is very effective. The fox will not be able to communicate with Naruko unless the seal is weakened or she is in a near-death situation. In this case, she will subconsciously open a link to it in order to save her life, because her mind would be weak in such a state. The Kyuubi will have control and would likely seek its revenge. Looking mainly at the civilians to make sure they were listening, he continued, it won't influence Naruko in the most basic sense unless she is in a heightened state of distress when she summons forth its power. Even then it depends on Naruko's will and chakra reserves to fend off the rage and bloodlust that she will feel while channeling its chakra. With training and making her a powerful kunoichi, she will use the chakra of the Kyuubi as a power battery in a sense. Taking a breath, he continued, this is the problem that most villages have with their Jinchuriki. they are stupid to attack, neglect or make the person who contains the beast believe they are indeed the beast itself. Since they will willingly give into the rage and bloodlust whenever they channel the beast's power, the Biju will have a much stronger influence over them. All the civilian councillors paled as they had all been thinking of finishing the late Yondaimi's work and killing the girl, or at the very least they all had thoughts of it making the girl miserable. But they were basically just told, anything like that would make the girl likely to become the beast they thought she already was. You seem to know a lot about the abilities of a Jinchuriki Uzumaki. Turning to Danzo, he let out a sigh. It might be better to kill the fool before he does so much shit in the future. Then again, he did the dirty work behind the scenes that unfortunately did keep Konoha safe, at least according to Tsunade and Itachi. Still, Danzo's words pissed him off greatly. Everyone's eyes widened when Naruto's eyes shifted to silver with a black vertical slit, his whiskers thickened and his canines elongated. He quickly released the small amount of killing intent. Before he could speak, another voice interrupted. I see, it makes sense that a Jinchuriki should raise another one, so I won't question you raising your own daughter, but which one do you contain? As far as I'm aware, all of the tailed beasts are accounted for, Fugaku Uchiha asked with a frown. Naruto looked at him and narrowed his eyes, thinking he shouldn't say anything. The Uchiha had the tablet according to Itachi, considering Shisui had the Mangekyo. Just how many other Uchiha did as well. Fugaku was the clan head. There's a good chance that the head of the clan would know about the Juubi. Then again, the Mangekyo didn't state all that was written, only of the Juubi's existence. After a moment, Naruto stated the same as he told the Hokage. What number comes after 9? There's a Juubi, how many more are there? A civilian stated, looked close to a state of panic. The look of shock on the Uchiha clan head's face was Naruto's favorite. Naruto then knew that the man likely did know, at least in part, what information lay on the tablet, if not directly, perhaps from the previous clan head's notes. Naruto waved his hand to dismiss the statement after seeing multiple squirming and worried looks around the room. None, the Juubi is the most powerful and the most secret of the tailed beasts, which is likely why none of you have heard of it before. It was thought to have been the beast sealed within the legendary Sage of the Six Paths. The council didn't know what to make of Naruto. He was telling them things that they believed to be true, then tossing them aside to state what he believed. How do we know you are telling the truth of which beast you contain? Hiashi Hyuga asked stoically. Naruto let out an audible sigh. What reason could he possibly have to lie about this? Tell the Yamanaka to enter your mind. I guard your memories, so he can't see anything about your past. Are you sure? Sure. I mean, I wouldn't want a little clip of when you got curious of the ladies' side of the hot springs to play by any chance, would we? I wonder what certain fathers would say, especially considering some daughters look so much like their mothers. Naruto blushed, then paled in short succession, confusing many in the room, thinking it was from Hiashi's question. Turning to Inoichi, Inoichi, feel up for confirming what I stated. The big boy promised to behave. I really hope he behaves, as suddenly the scene he witnessed between some of his age group in the hot springs popped up in his mind very clearly. He knew it was the Juubi and he couldn't help the perverted blush that came upon his cheeks. How did you know who I am? The blonde mind master asked with a frown of his own. This was starting to piss Naruto off a bit. He showed Minato apparently trusted him, so why wouldn't he talk about those that served on the council to advise him? Seriously, it was stupid on their behalf. Naruto, despite his irritation, calmly replied, for one, if Minato trusted me enough to teach the Rasengan and advanced Fuinjutsu, then why wouldn't he tell me of the important figureheads of the village? But if you must know, I figured out you were a member of the Inoshika Cho trio Minato spoke highly of, that was made famous in the last war, especially when Shikaku there binded me with his shadow with you and Shuza flanking him, said shadow user muttered out, troublesome. Inoichi turned to the Hokage who nodded before he walked over to Naruto and placed his right hand on his forehead. The room was silent waiting for confirmation. Inoichi appeared in a barren wasteland, everything seemed darker than it should be. Nothing appeared to be around except for the small foliage of trees in the distance. This was where he assumed the memories were. Confusion hit him as to why Naruto would have a mindscape. Most people he could just touch their mind and access the memories. Some extremely skilled shinobi could create mindscapes, but never in one so young. Being a ninja, he cautiously approached the trees while gazing the area. His instincts told him to turn, so he did so and gaped at what he assumed should be the moon. Instead, it was like a giant eye, watching the area intently. It looked like some sort of mutated Sharingan. A low growl was heard and Inoichi stiffened, a massive boom and the ground shaking beneath him. He knew what it must be. Turning around slowly, the man who considered himself mentally prepared for anything stared in complete fear at the creature in front of him. He just earlier today stood in front of the Kyuubi, but it held nothing to this feeling. The beast seemed to be shrouded in darkness, with a body matching the Kyuubi. That's where the similarities ended. This creature had a head with multiple spikes coming off it, making it seem darker than Kyuubi, more demonic. As if sensing this, the beast smiled, showing off its razor-sharp teeth that seemed to cover its entire jawline. Then its single eye opened. Gazing intently at him, "What's wrong, boy?" Inoichi fled the mind immediately as he saw the eye. "Oh Kami, Uzumaki, what the is that? Why isn't that thing in a cage? I've never heard of the beast being loose in one's mindscape. What's to stop it affecting your mind?" Naruto inwardly sweat dropped. "What did you do?" Asked him what's wrong. Sighing, he decided to answer a mixture of the truth with his knowledge of the Yamanaka beliefs to satisfy the man. "My mind, my rules. Beastie gets a greater taste of freedom within my mindscape. I can use his chakra with my own when I need to. Makes our existence together more bearable. You should know mind defenses utilize chakra. What did you think I meant when I said chakra can stop the influence of the beast?" "Well, Inoichi-san, did this, a beast, have 10 tails? Also, could you describe it?" the Sandaime asked of the mind jutsu user. The mind user gave a stiff nod. "Hokage-sama, that thing makes the Kyuubi seem like a puppy." Wide eyes met his statement as he went on to describe it. When he got to the eye description, Fugaku's eyes activated his Sharingan and he looked at Naruto intently. The aged leader nodded back. He thought of what Naruto told him before about the treatment of Jinchuriki. Giving the council a harsh glare, he stated, "Very well. At this point, the word of what you and your daughter likely or cannot be prevented, Naruto. However, as of now I am making it law under penalty of death, that no newcomer to the village, any child under the age of 2 and any future children born within Konoha, shall be told the truth of our newest Jinchuriki duo." The council was in an uproar, the civilians shouting about the safety of the children. The shinobi side merely watched Naruto's reaction and some sweat dropped when he appeared to not be listening. "Silence," the Hokage roared after the civilian side didn't look to be calming down. "They will not learn of the Kyuubi being sealed in young Naruto. The children and newcomers will be told the Kyuubi was killed by the Yondaime at the cost of his life. Is this understood? If it is not, I will order seals be placed on all who I believe will not keep the greatest secret of the village. In case you idiots haven't figured it out, we have the likely most powerful shinobi in our ranks as of now, as well as the potential in his daughter. You will not cripple our strength with your fears." Although he did do some interesting things that he could remember while drunk, kissing Sakura and ending up in a wall was well worth it. Although he decided to act like that never happened, even when she tried to pursue it later down the road, he felt his feelings for her had faded over time. It just was the kiss that made him realize it. The time he awoke to Kunoichi from various villages on some sort of makeshift bed freaked him out slightly, but he was able to suppress the memories unless Kurama felt like being in. Shaking his head of his musings, he went upstairs to find 4 rooms. One was set up to obviously be Naruto's room when she was older, a spare room, the master bedroom with a cot next to the king-size bed. The last room was something that made Naruto pale and look at Naruto in shock as comprehension suddenly dawned on him and the punishment for one of his drunken nights. Flashback. Tsunade walked into the underground hideout that housed Killer Bee and Naruto. Looking up, the young Jinchuriki smiled. Granny Tsunade, what are you doing here? She scowled at the nickname that was given to her, then an evil smile made its way to her face, freaking out the blonde Jinchuriki. I hear you had an interesting night, brat. I'm here to teach you something in case you messed up. Naruto looked up in surprise and paled, realizing his antics with a certain Iwan Nin were already part of the gossip rounds. Are really a Hokage-sama? What are you gonna teach me? It was then that he heard crying and his nose twitched and he looked around in confusion. He sniffed the air and found it was coming from Tsunade's direction. Frowning, he said, no offense, Granny, but you smell really bad. Who's that with the crying baby? The woman looked like was about to stomp over and beat him into the ground, then a moment later it was gone. The evil grin came back again. Oh, it's not me. That smell is coming from Naruto. It's her. She indicated the baby before her smile widened. I'm going to teach you how to care for a baby for the next few weeks. It looks like lesson 1 is changing her diaper. W equals what? Why do I have to learn that? Naruto demanded, eyeing the baby like it was her fault. Tsunade began to cackle darkly. This is your punishment for falling for some hussy's tricks, trying to flee here 5 times to escape other kunoichi I've heard stories from. And just because I want to, now come here so I can show you. Naruto started to back away slowly. Get here, now. Naruto took off running around the base with Tsunade after him. 15 minutes later, Tsunade was dragging a kicking and screaming Naruto, who looked like he had been hit by a sledgehammer in the face repeatedly, back to the baby, while she was chuckling darkly and the attendant with the baby looked on in worry. Flashback end. Naruto suddenly realized that he would have to change, feed and bathe Naruko. He looked down at her sleeping face and flinched when her face twitched. As if she had sensed his fear, she opened her eyes slowly and looked up at him. He swallowed thickly when her face seemed to scrunch up for a moment before she began to cry. A familiar smell filled the air and he let out a loud sigh. Placing her on the table, he panicked for a moment before he made 2 Kage Bushin, ordering one to go make up some formula and the second to pass him what he needed. A few minutes later, Naruko lay quietly looking around in wonder in a fresh diaper and an orange top. The first Kage Bunshin returned to see Naruto was thanking Granny Tsunade, like some kind of god. Ah, boss, I've got the formula here. Naruto turned and nodded before taking it and ordering it to dismiss itself. He checked the memory to make sure it was done right before picking Naruko up and putting her on his lap. All right, Naruko, it's no ramen, but it is good for you. He began feeding her. Naruto couldn't help but look at her curiously. The Kyuubi must already be strengthening her muscles because she was trying to hold onto the bottle herself. It could also be because of the fact she's got Uzumaki blood. They are renowned for their longevity and large chakra reserves that could be playing its part as well. Sighing, Naruto realized that anyone would see this as strange, especially those at the orphanage. He vaguely wondered if they actually fed him in those first few weeks. They probably didn't, hoping that the boy would die of starvation, but the Kyuubi would have kept him alive. Naruko ended up finishing the entire bottle and Naruto blinked before taking it away and burping her. She seemed content then and Naruto let out a sigh before heading to the master bedroom, placing her in the cot and looking down at her. Well, it looks like life's gotten a lot more interesting, huh, Naruko? He couldn't help but chuckle at the concept of raising your younger self, that is actually the opposite gender. With a deep sigh, knowing it was unlikely he could ever get back to his own world, since the mechanics behind his arrival to this exact point in time was unknown. Even then, he doubted he would want to go back to that world, where only a few of his friends remained alive. I promise I'll protect you, Naruko. The parent I always wished I had growing up. He created 2 Kage Bunshins to grab some formula or diapers if the need arises before laying down and trying to get some sleep.